listener production.
Hey, it's Chris Spear with you. Happy Friday and welcome to The Briefing. When you think of dinosaur bones, you probably think about museums and glass boxes. But what if I told you there's a chance there's a little piece of history chilling in your own backyard?
I think it's important that the ability to have some fossils, as long as they're not important and shouldn't be in collections, if they're duplicates and so on, I don't see a problem with some private individuals having them.
So, how easy is it to find dinosaur bones and fossils in Australia? And who should be trusted with preserving them for future generations? That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Sasha Barbagat. It's Friday, the 20th of Feb.
G'day, Chris. We start to news in overnight from the UK. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. At the time of recording today, we know that the former prince is in custody as police search two properties, including his residence at Sandringham and former royal home at Windsor. It is the disgraced royal's 66th birthday today.
Thames Valley Police have confirmed they've arrested him following a thorough assessment and investigations are continuing. It's not clear if or when Mountbatten-Windsor will be charged, but we know the offence of misconduct in public office carries with it a possible life sentence. The investigation is linked to his ties to sex trafficker and disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein.
It was launched after a recent drop of documents from the Epstein files in the US, which revealed the former prince had sent information to Epstein related to his work as a government trade envoy, with questions over whether the details he sent were classified. It's worth noting here that the arrest is not related to any accusations against him in relation to the sexual assault of Virginia Giuffre, claims he has consistently denied. But it is understood Thames Valley Police are looking into allegations from the Epstein files that Mountbatten-Windsor received trafficked women in Britain, including to his royal residence.
We've heard from King Charles, who's put out a statement expressing the deepest concern at the arrest of his brother and that he would cooperate with any investigation. The family of the late Virginia Giuffre has also put out a statement which said, quote, "At last, today our broken hearts have been lifted at the news that no one is above the law, not even royalty." Giuffre died by suicide late last year before the release of her memoir in which she detailed her allegations of rape against the disgraced prince after she was trafficked by Epstein.
Yeah, so this is huge news, Chris. It's worth noting it is a pretty tough charge to prove, this charge of misconduct in public office, which he has not been handed yet. He has only been arrested. Investigations are continuing. But if he is charged with it, it needs to be shown that the accused was acting in an official capacity and that they willfully neglected to perform their duty or engaged in misconduct, and that their conduct was bad enough as to amount to an abuse of the public's trust. So we have a long road ahead of us to see whether, he is even charged with this offence. As we said, it's difficult to prove. Now, in terms of royals being arrested, this is extraordinary. The most recent occurrence of something even close to being similar is King Charles I way back in 1649. He was charged and tried for treason and eventually beheaded. More recently, Princess Anne was fined for speeding in 2001, his sister. She was convicted the following year after one of her dogs bit two kids. So this is just unprecedented in terms of the scope and scale of the modern royal family. So one to watch for sure. And it's worth noting tomorrow on the weekend briefing, I am actually chatting with the woman who did that infamous BBC Newsnight interview with the then Prince Andrew in 2019, Emily Maitlis. An absolutely fascinating chat with an incredible journalist and woman who really did break this Epstein scandal wide open in terms of the British royal family. So big story, big news this morning.
Staying overseas and to Washington, where Donald Trump's Board of Peace has met for the very first time. As part of the highly anticipated first meeting was a promise of a military base in Gaza and a contribution of $10 billion from the US towards the body tasked with rebuilding and overseeing the governance of the Strip.
Representatives from 40 countries have descended on Washington for the summit. Among them, the leaders of Hungary, Argentina, Indonesia and Kazakhstan, countries including Israel, India, Egypt and Turkey, as well as Qatar and Saudi Arabia were represented by other delegates. Noticeably absent were a number of key US allies, including Australia, as well as France, the UK, Spain, Germany and Canada. Now, Trump says the board has raised $7 billion, which is about 10 billion AUD, in initial payments towards Gaza's reconstruction fund. He also gave us more detail on his so-called International Stabilization Force, which he's hoping will have up to 20,000 troops and 12,000 police officers. He also says that Hamas has promised to disarm, and that was looking likely, claiming he wanted to use force as a last resort.
And just circling back to that military base, we know that will be an operating base for the International Stabilization Force that you've just mentioned there, Sash. That will have capacity to hold about 5,000 people. It's expected to have watchtowers, bunkers, warehouses for military equipment, and they're saying that it could be as big as 350 acres. Now, we have spoken about the Board of Peace before. I'll pop a link to that deep dive in the show notes, but essentially there's a theory amongst a lot of experts that it will operate in contest with the United Nations. A lot of people are kind of curious as to how a board like this will operate with the UN. According to Trump, the UN will chip in $2 billion for humanitarian assistance. The way he's speaking about it is that the UN will work with his Board of Peace when it comes to Gaza specifically. We haven't heard from the UN on that just yet.
Back home, the former Jetstar pilot accused of murdering Carol Clay in the Victorian High Country has applied for bail. Greg Lynn, who last year had his initial conviction of murder set aside over a substantial miscarriage of justice in the first trial, is about to face a retrial. Lawyers for the man have filed documents in the Supreme Court asking that Lynn be allowed back into the community as he awaits his next court date, which is yet to be set.
He was accused of murdering companions Russell Hill and Clay in March 2020. Lynn was acquitted of killing Hill, but found guilty and sentenced to 32 years for the murder of the 73-year-old woman before a retrial was ordered. He has always maintained his innocence, arguing the pair's death were tragic accidents set in motion by separate struggles over a knife and a gun.
A love of a bargain could be driving up inflation, a leading economist is warning us after it was revealed we've spent around $17 billion at just two retail giants over the past 6 months. Any guesses what they were? Let me tell you, retail conglomerate Wesfarmers dropped their financials yesterday, showing sales at Bunnings were up 4.2% in the 6 months to December, with pet food, car products and power tools the standouts, while Kmart recorded a 3.3% jump, largely thanks to its cheaper Anko line.
Yes, and according to AMP economist Shane Oliver, the numbers suggest Aussies are more willing to get out there and spend, but want value for money amid rolling cost of living pressures. Speaking to News Corp, Oliver said consumer spending started to pick up last year, and that's, reflected in the ABS data that we've been getting. But when combined with high levels of public spending, that is helping drive up demand, and that's where inflation comes into play. But he said the direction of consumer spending is, quote, the big unknown in our economy at the moment, especially after the RBA lifted interest rates by 25 basis points to 3.85% earlier this month, with the hope of bringing down our spending. So whether this trend will continue, I think it will. I love an Anko purchase. I'm more likely to grab myself something from Anko than I am from a brand. Especially when it comes to clothes. Some of the Anko tees are actually quite good. So whether or not that lift in interest rates will bring down spending is another one that we're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, well, we also saw the job figures come out yesterday and they were not in favour of driving down the official cash rate. In fact, they're saying it's pretty likely that we'll see another one next month. So, yeah, sorry about that.
And YouTube's first ever video has been acquired by a top London museum, immortalising the beginning of a global cultural phenomenon. The Victoria and Albert Museum has painstakingly reconstructed the watch page of the first upload titled Me at the Zoo, featuring the co-founder of the site, Jord Karim.
All right, so here we are, one of the elephants. Cool thing about these guys is that they have really long fronts, and that's cool. And that's pretty much all there is to say.
Wow, the early internet, my God.
Well, yeah, the 19-second clip was posted in April of 2005. It sounds like it was filmed on a toaster and looks like. It now has more than 382 million views and, like you said, has been immortalised at a top London museum. It is far from being the most watched video, though, even though it's been up the longest. Chris, do you want to have a guess at what the most watched video of all time is?
I'm hoping it's Trisha Paytas's meltdown in her kitchen, but I could be wrong.
I've got something for you to play.
Oh, I'm a fool. I should have guessed this first. Absolutely.
Makes me feel sick. 16 billion views. Anytime this song comes on a playlist for my son, I actually turn it off. I don't want him to know it exists.
I've got PTSD from my days as a child entertainer because, this is one that the kids absolutely adored and I'm very good at performing.
16 billion views. Coming in second was Despacito by Louis Fonsi, one of my favourites, actually.
What a throwback.
8.8 billion views, so almost half of what the top video had. And third was this banger by Coco Melon.
The wheels on the bus go round and round.
This is my life now as well.
Oh my God, it's not even like a cool version of it. It's not like the Wiggles remix. You know how they're dropping those ones?
It's lame.
This one sucks.
All of the top 10 videos are music videos, whether they're kids, like nursery rhymes, like we just heard, or music videos of artists. Shape of You by Ed Sheeran came in 7th, and this one came in 10th, one of my faves.
Oppan Gangnam Style.
Yes.
I love this song.
Me too. What a throwback. Love it.
That is all for our headlines today and for the week. Thank you for being here. Next up, we've got Helen Smith's deep dive looking into the private collection of dinosaur bones that some people are hoarding. Is it okay? I don't know. Find out next.
Dinosaur bones and fossils are a sought-after market, from private investors to researchers, museums, and even celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio and Russell Crowe. Everyone wants to get their hands on them. And just before Christmas, an Aussie family found a fossilised vertebrae that's thought to be over 20 million years old. But it brought up the debate of science versus status and who should be able to own a dinosaur, and how paleontologists rely on members of the public for a lot of their new discoveries. Michael Archer is a leading paleontologist specialising in Australian vertebrates. Michael, how easy is it to buy a dinosaur bone or rare fossil?
Actually, it's very easy. If you go out on the web, these sorts of things are for sale all the time. Shark's teeth are very common things people buy, but you can also get dinosaur bones. You can even get, if it amuses you, dinosaur poop you can buy on the line. So there's quite a lot of different things out there available for sale. One would hope that most of the specimens that are being sold are not particularly scientifically important. Many of these fossils occur by the millions, and those few that go into the commercial trade are not damaging the scientific value, as long as the better specimens, or some of the best specimens, are in museums for researchers to study.
When it comes to maybe the more expensive or bigger artifacts, are most of these purchases happening through auction houses or private dealers or online, like you just said before?
I think most of the really exciting specimens, whole dinosaurs and so on, are constantly being turned up by paleontologists themselves, working through museums and universities. They're out all the time scouring these fossil deposits. But of course, the reality is there's a great world out there to look for fossils in. And paleontologists can't cover them all. And certainly here in Australia, we utterly depend on the public to spot fossils. But it's the public's first spotting of these things that's critical. So many of the fossil deposits I've researched in Australia were found by members of the public while they were fishing, wondering what that strange lump was they were standing on while they were casting their line into the water, and it turns out to be a jawbone of an extinct diprotodontid. But occasionally, yes, some of the biggest items, like the very famous T-Rex skeleton that went to market, do end up in commercial bidding wars. And then the museums also wade in, and most museums have a fund to be able to buy things to compete with other individuals who might want to buy them. In Australia, that doesn't happen very often, because here, it seems to me, most Australians recognize the importance of having important specimens in museums because it's part of the natural heritage of the continent. It's not something that private individuals should hoard. And certainly while I was director of the Australian Museum, one of the things I did was establish a specimen purchasing fund.
Is there any moments when private investors or private collectors do outbid the museums or researchers, and what happens then?
I guess everyone's sort of fatalistic. Occasionally, really important specimens end up in private collections. And when I've encountered situations like this, I've had conversations with them and said, will you, in your will, commit to sending these specimens to the museum when you no longer are able to look after them? And generally, people say, sure, not a problem. So as long as they turn them over later, that's fine. The worst thing that can happen, of course, is there isn't a conversation of this kind that takes place. And when the owner dies, or for that matter, loses interest, and their partner thinks this is just a bit of rubbish and ends up throwing it out. And occasionally this sort of disaster happens, or sells it or something. In Australia, we have very strict rules about the possibility of important fossils being sold overseas. It's not allowed. And we often get sent images by customs of objects they've seen being potentially sent overseas. And in one case, I was able to recognize the skull that the person was trying to send internationally clearly had come from a fossil deposit in the Northern Territory. I recognized the preservation and everything, and therefore had been collected illegally, because normally you have to have permits to actually collect from any of the important fossil sites in Australia. We've also used those situations where we know occasionally there have been people, thieves in effect, going into protected fossil sites, World Heritage areas, to make sure that there is more protection there, guarded, locked fences so that it's not easy for private collectors to be able to get in with vehicles to take out fossils. So there's a lot you can do, but it's a huge country, and to try to protect all the protected spots, really difficult.
Speaking about some of those laws and regulations, if someone does stumble across or find a fossil or rare artefact here in Australia, what do they have to do? Can they just sell it, or is there a board or a body that they'll go to?
Well, of course, what we hope is like what happened recently when that family made a discovery of fossil whale bones on a beach in Victoria, that they contact the local museum. That results in a lot of important things happening. The family is enormously appreciated. In some cases, they can get a cast of some of the fossils that they can keep. Sometimes the fossil they find might be new. And there was a whale found a little while ago, a fossil whale in Victoria, and the person who found it ended up having the fossil whale named after them. So they become immortalized by having made this sort of a discovery. There is a difference of opinion. Like in the United States, for example, one of the organizations that's most involved with research in vertebrate fossils, animals with backbones, has made a statement that they don't think private collectors should have any of these, and that all of those specimens should be in museums. Well, I think this is actually kind of silly. When there are thousands and thousands of these teeth replicating the types of teeth that the museums already have, I don't see any problem with private individuals having some of those specimens. And often that's what triggers a kid when they have a fossil tooth to suddenly decide they want to become a paleontologist. It excites them. There's a mystery coming from the geological past, and they want to know more about it. So I think it's important that the ability to have some fossils, as long as they're not important and shouldn't be in collections, if they're duplicates and so on, I don't see a problem with some private individuals having them. Best to let the museums know that you have them, and everybody usually understands and says, great.
Speaking of the Aussie family that found that fossilised vertebrae just before Christmas, are there any particular environments or regions where fossils are found more often?
That's a really important question. When we take people out into the field, because we often have members of the public come out with us, families and so on, because we want to share the excitement of making discoveries. And one of the things we learned long ago was not to tell them where we think they'll find the fossils in the area that we've arrived in, because they'll look in other places it never would have occurred to us to check. And often that's happened, that somebody's come back and found a fossil, and we think, where'd you get it? And they tell us, and we say, no, there wouldn't be any deposits there. And they said, I'll show you. And they drag us over there, push our face into the ground and say, what's that? And, wow. And we never would have thought of doing that.
So if someone is interested in maybe joining a field trip or finding a fossil or an artefact of their own, how can they actually help out researchers, museums, and find an artefact?
Yeah, the quickest and easiest way is to get in touch with the local university or museum and talk to the paleontologist. Say you'd love to volunteer to join a trip. And in many cases, these opportunities are there, and we're delighted to work with members of the public. Another way this sometimes happens is even people who have retired and they just want to do something extra beyond what they did for the previous rest of their life. And some of them are very happy to help. They might even give us a donation that helps us buy a microscope, or it helps our research actually take place. And boy, are we grateful for that. And then very often, we end up naming something after them in gratitude. Being immortalized like that is a wonderful way to bond the member of the public into the whole field. They become a part of it, part of history, unraveling the prehistory of Australia. It's really wonderful. So I've said that if they find a fossil, one of the first things they should do is to make, and as this family did in Victoria, make absolutely certain you can find it again. Take a picture of it. Take careful notes, if you happen to have a GPS on your phone or whatever, to take an actual record of the geographic position of the fossil where you found it, and then let somebody know about it. If they look at it, the photo that you send them, if they say, oh, that does look interesting, then they'll arrange with you to go back to the spot and check it out. And that's what happened with that whale discovery in Victoria. Mind you, I think reading the story, it's funny because sand had covered the site, and it took them something like 6 hours to refine it again. But they did refine it. Good luck to them. That was great.
Overall, is there anything wrong with someone buying a dinosaur bone or rare fossil?
As far as I'm concerned, no. Chances are, if it's been out there for sale, it's okay to have it on sale if it's on, eBay or whatever. And I've also bought things like that. Sometimes I bought shark's teeth that I'm going to use for teaching purposes online. So I will do this as well. I don't see a problem with this. If the person who buys it suspects it might be particularly important, by all means, bring it into the museum or the university and show it to them. Let people talk about it and explain to you maybe more information about what you got than you would have otherwise received. But I don't see any problem with people having fossils, particularly if they're not critically important scientifically and they do trigger interest. This was exactly how I got into the field. When I was a kid, I was 11 years old. I didn't know about paleontology. I was growing up in upstate New York. I was born in Australia, but I grew up in the United States. And in the backyard, an ancient glacier had kindly dropped a giant boulder there that didn't belong there. It was stripped out of Canada somewhere and then dumped in my backyard. And when I had a good look at it, I saw all these weird squiggly things in it. And I realized they looked like animals in shells. And it turned out it was 400 million years old. But of course, I didn't know what I was looking at. I spent every moment out of school with a sledgehammer and a hammer and a chisel, and I took the boulder apart. And I put all the fossils into a suitcase, and I got on the steam train, went down to New York City, introduced myself to the American Museum of Natural History. They looked in my suitcase, and their eyes popped out because they didn't have fossils of this particular age. And that triggered me. At age 11, I was hooked. So I know what fossils can do in the way of triggering a lifelong interest in somebody. And I can only wish this happens to as many kids as possible.
Wow, that is an incredible story, Mike. Mike, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
It's a pleasure, Helen.
That was Michael Archer there, a leading paleontologist. And thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. Before you go, though, we'd love it if you could share this ep with someone else you think might enjoy it as well. It's a really easy way you can support everything we do here at The Briefing. And you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.